Trump's recent sharp rapprochement with Russia while harshly criticizing both Ukraine and the European Union has shocked many. Such a sharp change in the United States vector is rare, and Trump's actions are criticized by many. Perhaps these are just maneuvers during negotiations, or perhaps they are an attempt to create a new alliance between the countries or to bring them closer together. In this issue, we will discuss whether an alliance between the United States and Russia is possible and why the United States might go for it. As many people know, U.S.-Russian relations have been in a rather difficult situation for decades, and recently they have been on an escalating course. A clear deterioration between the two countries occurred more than 100 years ago, and the basis for the confrontation was the Bolsheviks' rise to power in Russia. Since then, the countries have regarded each other as enemies and justified it with ideological reasons. Only the Second World War became a moment of rapprochement, and after it ended, the so-called Cold War began almost immediately between the USSR and the United States. The two superpowers began to fight for world leadership and the promotion of their own values. A kind of struggle between capitalism and socialism took place. Relations at that time changed from the most tense to the calmest, but the hostility did not disappear almost until the collapse of the USSR. It was only at the end of 2880 Gorbachev's rule that there was a warming, and with the collapse of the USSR and the emergence of the Russian Federation, relations stabilized for the first time in a long time. But it was short-lived. In the noughties, they began to deteriorate again, and under Putin's leadership, the country became increasingly hostile. Hybrid conflicts, confrontations, and struggles for spheres of interest began again. This largely culminated in the war in Ukraine. Is the current Trump administration capable of turning the relationship between Russia and the United States around? His election promises were aimed at ending the war in Ukraine at any cost, and this plan has begun to be realized. Paradoxically, the Trump administration has been much softer with Russia than its predecessors, and Ukraine, the victim of this war, has been fiercely criticized by the new administration. Relations with Europe are also tense. It seems that Trump is actively playing along with Putin and has set a course for rapprochement with Russia. Is this possible, and why does Trump need all this? The first is to end the war in Ukraine, which Trump is trying to achieve by any means necessary. His clash with Zelensky has a lot to do with how to end the war and what to do next. Zelensky rightly insists that Ukraine needs security guarantees to prevent Russia from attacking again after some time. Trump, on the one hand, agrees with the existing risks and speaks of the need for long-term peace, but on the other hand, he denies Ukraine real security guarantees. He is not going to send American peacekeepers, and he constantly threatens to stop arms transfers. The recent conflict has also arisen over agreements on the transfer of resources. The United States insists on signing the agreement, while the Ukrainian government does not understand what it can gain from it. At the same time, the United States does not promise any guarantees based on the results of the agreement. Trump's negative attitude toward Ukraine is largely due to such disagreements, and with Russia, he says, he feels there is easier dialogue and more understanding. The second key reason is an attempt to pull Russia away from China. Trump's apparent rapprochement with Russia and even playing along with it in some narratives, for example about the outbreak of war and Biden's guilt, is primarily aimed at bringing Russia to his side, or at least making it neutral toward both the United States and China. Since his first term, Trump's entire foreign policy has focused on China as the main enemy and competitor of the United States. It was Trump who started the trade war with China and sees it as the main threat. Russia can play a serious supporting role in this regard. Its rapprochement with China will give the latter significant trump cards in its confrontation with the United States. Firstly, Russia's considerable resources and large market. Secondly, it has the largest nuclear capability on par with the United States, making the Russia-China alliance even more powerful than the United States itself. China cannot match the United States in terms of nuclear weapons, but it can economically. Russia, on the other hand, cannot economically, but it can with nuclear weapons. To a certain extent, Trump's actions resemble Kissinger's policy, but in reverse. Back then, the United States decided to get closer to China in order to finally tear it away from the Soviet Union, and was even ready to get closer to the communist dictator Mao, leaving its ally in Taiwan aside. At that time, it was the USSR that was the main opponent of the United States, and China was a supporting player. In the 20th century, the situation changed. Now Russia is a supporting player that the United States wants to win over. Kissinger's tactics partially worked, the USSR fell. But later, China became the new hegemon, although only half a century later. The third theme is the ideological convergence between Trump and Putin. Both leaders are trying to rely on similar conservative values and anti-globalization trends. We will not discuss how sincere their motives are, but the commonalities and points of intersection are obvious. After coming to power, Trump immediately began to actively criticize the leftist Western elites, close down various international aid projects, and effectively curtailed diversity and inclusion policies. All of this has long been criticized by the Kremlin establishment. Interference in the internal affairs of countries, criticism of leftist ideas and their promotion, support for conservative family and religious values, all of this can be a unifying factor for both sides. While Putin's and Trump's domestic policies differ dramatically, they have much in common in external aspects and rhetoric. Their approach to realpolitik is also similar. Trump, as soon as he became president, immediately began to claim influence or even territory in neighboring countries. His hawkish rhetoric was not too different from the Kremlin's. Such an approach to big politics is more likely to bring the parties closer together and to build understanding on certain issues. However, there are insurmountable problems between the United States and Russia that can be discussed but cannot be completely eliminated. This is likely to achieve a temporary détente between the countries, but it will be extremely difficult to make them full-fledged allies. The issue of NATO is a constant concern for Putin, at least rhetorically, and for the United States, it is a traditional zone of influence that it seeks to expand. Even before the full-scale invasion, Putin issued an ultimatum to Biden. All NATO troops and infrastructure must leave Eastern Europe and return to the level of 1997 before the alliance's expansion. Russia is thus claiming to restore the Soviet zone of influence, but the United States, even under Trump, is unlikely to go along with this. Moreover, many Eastern European countries remain the most loyal to the United States and have close ties with it, such as Poland or the Baltic states. That is why the issue of NATO's influence is becoming an obsession for both sides. The United States will not abandon its allies. Russia will remain dissatisfied with the very existence of NATO. The NATO bloc already includes many Eastern European countries, and its overall structure is largely directed against Russia. The United States and Russia are traditional enemies, and this status is unlikely to change without significant changes in both countries. A rapprochement between the United States and Russia may occur only situationally, as it did during World War II, but it is unlikely to last. The United States and Russia claim the same spheres of influence, which inevitably leads to conflicts, both in military terms, expanding their presence in third countries, and in economic terms. Countries compete for the same markets and are the largest suppliers of key resources, oil, gas, agricultural products, etc. Conflicts also occur in other regions, far beyond Europe. This can be seen in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and even Latin America. The United States and Russia often support opposing forces, and this will continue as long as both countries are able to finance and influence the situation abroad. To summarize, an alliance between Russia and the United States is possible. The United States is interested in pulling Russia away from China and sees this as a strategic goal. At the same time, the level of contradictions between the two countries is quite high, especially in terms of claims to spheres of influence, which is unlikely to allow them to enter into a long-term alliance. Unless it is a situational one, there have been such cases in history. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel to not miss new videos.
I never answer to no, man, I still go, 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 go.